It's rare that I'm thankful to be making short episodes of Backtracking. I love this series, don't get me wrong, but when picking small bands to do before big finales, I really should pick more carefully. I picked Sworn In mostly on a whim after first listening to them in, I think, 2014? I don't remember. Late 2013, early 2014. Anyway, the band themselves first formed in 2011 and have since then gone through so many label and lineup changes that it'd be hard to keep up, but I'm going to try throughout the episode. And the only member to be with the band still to this day is drummer Chris George. Anyway, the band themselves are one of the first to try to breathe life into the new metalcore genre, and I'm here to tell you if I thought that they succeeded or not. It's Backtracking, and this time it's Sworn In. Let's face the music. We start with the band's debut album, The Death Card. Released in 2013 through the Writers of Entire Records, it's the band's only album with producer Ryan Hood. It also contains my first Swan song in Snake Eyes, which is maybe the most recognisable song. I actually remember distinctly liking it, and even though I never listened to The Death Card during its year of release before I first heard the song in 2014, I had a feeling that I'd be getting into this band sooner or later. When it came to listening to the Death Card for this episode, I didn't know fully what to expect, and I was pleasantly surprised to say the least. Due to the title of this album and their next one, the band did sort of have a gimmick of naming their albums after tarot cards, and this one being titled what it is does sort of have a concept to it. Actually, the structuring tells all with that and goes to a lot of places, usually ending a song with a different riff, only to start the next song with that same riff to continue the flow. It's a really good pace, and I can appreciate that. The band members at this time were Tyler Denon, who'd been there at the start, then left for a bit, and then came back for this one. Eugene Kamluyuk on guitar, I can only hope I'm saying that surname correctly. Zachary Gibson also on guitar, Sean Banks on bass, and Chris George on drums. This album would be Sean's only appearance, and he was their second bassist after the first one, Mike Piontek, left. Eugene and Zachary had only recently joined the band at this point, having left a year earlier and replaced by Peter Masouras and Matt Redlin, only for them to leave and for one poor Kenny Pickett to take their places. Eugene even took up vocals during Tyler's buggering off period, so I don't know. Like I said, a lot of members, but that's all the band bullshit covered, so let's get a move on. As I've mentioned, I like the structuring and the pacing. It's a good sense of controlled chaos, even bordering on some death metal here and there too, but it's not overstepping its boundaries and it keeps a good consistency. Lyrically, it goes over topics like death, depression, suicide, and romance, so it's a dark subject matter for an equally dark-themed album, telling a good story that flows really well. Tyler's vocals are pretty good, with rare usage of clean singing on this one. This is probably the album which has the most screams, but he's still balanced. He has guttural screaming, and it sounds well and good, and it conveys a good emotion and tone. Eugene and Zachary both provide good guitar chops with nice breakdowns, heavy chords and riffs, and a good sound. Sean's bass isn't too bad for his only album, with a good riff of his own, nice drive and good balance. And Chris' drumming is pretty awesome, actually, with good speed, heavy hitting work, and good timing and backbone. I'd say Chris is probably my favourite member of the band. Sort of. Standout songs include Hypocrisy, Mute, Snake Eyes, Deadpan, and my favourite in 3 Cheers. The Death Card is a unique concept album that uses a weird genre to tell the story, but it works well and it's carried by good production value, performances, and a balanced, controlled sense of chaos and just insanity, so I can recommend this one. Next is the band's second album, The Lovers/The Devil. Released in 2015, the band stay on Razor and Tie, whilst also on the In Grooves label, and due to that it has 2 producers in Will Putney, best known for his work in Fit for an Autopsy, and Randy LaBeouf, best known for not being Shy's brother. I know, actually looked it up, he's not his brother. It's also the band's longest album at 41 minutes and 31 seconds. We also have a new lineup shift with a new bassist in Derek Slim Baldman. You know, 41.5 minutes isn't long in terms of longest albums by bands, especially considering how many I've listened to for the series, but this album fills that space by completely wasting its time, and by extension, our time as well. Yeah, I hate this album. I think that I hate it more because on the Death Card, Sworn In tried everything in their power to avoid being caught up in the tropes of other bands doing what they were doing at the time. On The Lovely Devil, the band decided to just jump dick first into those tropes, and it's really not a good thing. Being caught between 2 labels and 2 different producers really doesn't help. Everyone's trying to do too much at once, and you can't help but feel that maybe this album should have been the debut and the Death Card should have been the second album, because that album is better than this one. It just feels safe and at the same time way too chaotic. I don't mind more clean vocals, but I do mind such a drastic and sudden change in the song that I'm listening to. What I wonder if this album was more insanity for those heavy songs to be just that. But we get that, and then we get whiplashed into the clean stuff, and I don't like it. It doesn't build to it, it just snaps into it like a misguided chiropractor. Yeah, I've been watching Zero Punctuation lately, whatever. The uneasy structuring just doesn't carry the story well, and it's a pain to get through that way. I'd like it more if it went full-on chaotic, but they were trying too hard to ground it in the concept of the album. Said concept is told first from a boy's point of view in a bad relationship where he's obsessive over the girl who is distant, and those two moods change halfway through, but it's really hard to tell when. Lyrically, it focuses on the story's points of obsession, depression, love, and dark thoughts, but it's repetitive as all hell, with the bleh sound overused so much that I thought that Tyler was actually going to vomit at some points. Speaking of Tyler, he does perform decently enough when he's allowed to, but he feels too restrictive and the storytelling is way off base. Eugene and Zachary have good guitar work, with even some solos and new stuff being tried, but it's too much at once and doesn't make up for the rest of the album. Their Expect is there, apparently, if you can find it under all the shit and the burial of production. And Chris does his best on the drums, and I want to like him more, but considering that he wrote most of the songs on this album, most of the music, as well as the drumming, you can't help but feel like it was just all a bad choice. Standard songs include Sunshine, Sugar Lips, Pocket Full of Posies, and my favourite in Ollie Ollie Oxenfree. Yes, that is the name of it. The Love is the Devil is just plain bad. Bad and repetitive lyrics, structuring, production, and way too much executive meddling. I cannot recommend this one to anyone in any capacity. It's an absolute fucking mess. Do not listen to it for the love of God. And finally, we have the band's third and most recent album, All Smiles. Released in 2017, we have another label change sworn in with during the Fearless family, and the producer, why not, for this one is Chris Crummett. It's also the band's shortest album at 38 minutes and 52 seconds, and you know what? This is a good album. I spent chunks of 2017 complaining that I liked this album more than I should, but that was mostly because I hadn't recovered from the wounds of The Love of the Devil. I know that doesn't make sense because I listen to one album a day for this series, but listening to this album the day after the second one helps to rip the bandage off faster. Anyway, you might notice from the title that the band have completely dropped their tarot card thing, this time focusing on a darker album than they usually would. Before I go more into it though, it's time to talk about the couple of lineup changes that would follow. This was the band's first and only album as a four-piece, as Zachary left in 2016, and it would be the band's last album with Tyler as lead singer, having left quite recently, in fact just a couple of weeks ago, and Eugene will now take over as the new lead vocalist. Still, that now leaves the band as a three-piece, and I have no clue who the touring musicians are, I just hope they're good guys. Anyway, back to talking about this album. It adds more elements of ambient and dark stuff and noise rock, and it actually works really well. It's melded together brilliantly and actually tells a better story than The Lovely Devil did. Feeling like a detailed descent into the demented inner workings of Tyler Down, and he slowly loses more and more of his mind. More like I lose more and more of my speech because I just sound naturally slurred. I don't really drink much. Why is my voice like this? I'm weird. It's hard to tell if it's a character or himself, but it feels more like the latter, and that's how storytelling on an album should be. The structuring bolsters that greatly, with the different sounds working well and actually building to something instead of just whipping from one to the other and being a pain to keep up with, keeping the pace actually really consistent like on their first album. Lyrically, it focuses on the usual stuff of depression, anxiety, dark thoughts, love, and so on, but it's more of a mental state album in that sense, as Tyler struggles to keep his cool throughout it, and it's really good to hear him crack from time to time. Tyler himself put in another good vocal performance with good balance of singing and screaming and great storytelling that's almost visceral at points. It feels too realistic. Eugene on his own is welcome, and he gets a good riff and choke here and there with great breakdowns and little blips and more experimental stuff too on the guitar. Derek's bass work is also good with a depth and groove to it that's easier to hear this time around, and Chris's drumming continues to impress with great speed, power timing, and combos. Standout songs include Puppeteer, Make It Hurt, with the first track in the album, Cry Baby, Hell You Put Me Through, and my favourite in the title track. Doing everything right that they got so wrong last time made Sworn In legit again in my eyes. Great production, performances, storytelling, and balance. I could recommend this one. Hell yes, siree. So, let's round them up. My favourite is probably All Smiles. Dropping the tarot gimmick thing helped, but it also helped that it's a genuinely good album with great pacing, balance, and all the other stuff that I said, really. Least favourite is The Love is the Devil. Why? Because it's... Okay, there's a lot of analogies, similes, and metaphors that I could use, but let's just call it a really shitty mess and move on with our lives. Because it really is. Anyway, the next episode is going to take a while because it will be the season finale. It's 2 parts and it's Eminem. But I'll likely see you before that for more UFC-based shenaniganery. Which I don't even think is a word, but I don't care. I'll see you all soon. Most likely on Thursday. Thank you for listening. You're awesome. Bye bye.